I know. American posted. By the end of the day, that I'm not. Let's see. These. It's kind of an old one. So here's one. Yeah, very. Yeah, we all know him. And then you all, yeah, Alfred Edmund. He had one. Your money, your life. So you see, it's centered around him. Read this, read that. So it just different things. Again, it could just be, hey, Jason, the podcast. So some of those things work. I hope that answered your question. Let me just check again.
So Monica, we have a couple of other questions, and that is, which podcast host do you currently use?
Right now, my show is on YouTube, but when I launch the podcast, just audio, I'm going to use Spotify. Just because, I mean, you can be on several of them. A Podbean. I'm sorry, Podbean. It look at the pricing. You look at what they offer, so you can do your research and your budget, all that in mind. They're not terribly expensive, but if you're spending $20 and you never use it, then that's just wasted money.
And then the second question, and I think someone said, what was the second microphone? And then someone asked, what is the role? What is the role model number of the mic you showed?
Oh, okay. This is a cool mic. It really is. And I thought it would be more expensive than it is. It's a little about 110. It's Rode, Rode. And let me get the box. Might be easier. NT USB Mini.
For those, and I can gather you get that from Amazon.
Oh, you can get that from B&H. You can get that from Amazon. They will sell you this one. And so if you plan to have a co-host or a guest, and you're going to go maybe to the office or to another place, it's so lightweight and portable. And so again, you're going to plug into your computer the USB, and you're going to have a little power cord here, and you are set. And all you have to do is set it down at a reasonable angle. You don't have to get all up in the mic or anything like that, and it works. You want to make sure that you're speaking onto the right side of the microphone. And it's just so easy.
So Monica, in regards to the lighting, I know that's always important, because I know when you and I did when we did the podcast, I was kind of going in and out because the sun, right? So can you talk a little bit about the lighting and the importance of that?
If you're going to do video, lighting is important. If it's just audio, you're more concerned with the sound. You want to make sure that you're not in rooms that are echoey or sound like an orchestra chamber or anything like that. Now, let's say you are going to do your podcast as a video podcast. So lighting is important. So there are things, hold on a second. You can get an O-ring that lights up. Let me see if I can get this. I'm so glad there's not a camera in here. So I don't know how many of you have seen this one before. So it gives you some lighting. You always want to make sure that the light is not washing you out, or you're doing it in a window. Oftentimes people want to do it in a window where they have that kind of light, and it's just too much. Either you just get all washed out, or you look too dark in it. So this is a ring light. See how I put some actual light on me? So yeah. So again, this is not very expensive, 30 bucks, $35 that you can get. You can also, if you're going to be doing video, and what people do is they decide that even though it's a video podcast, they're going to repurpose it. They're going to actually have just the audio. That's going to be a podcast. And then they say, oh, for more outtakes, fun, go to the YouTube channel, and they'll have the actual video podcast there as well.
Well, great. That is awesome. Now, Monica, do you mind giving us, you may be getting ready to do this, kind of give us some tips in regards to the interviewing process when
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
another
You know,
guest?
and what I'm going to do, especially if people are more interested in the tips for interviewing, I'm going to put together for you those 7 tips in a checklist. So you'll have them. And but if you think we want to spend more time on being the interviewer, asking good questions of the guests, we can do that. And Laverne, if you want to, ask me questions, or people want to put questions in the chat, we can do that as well. And I won't necessarily share my screen. One of the things that's really helpful is to figure out not just the format, but the run of show. Laverne, you and your staff do that very well. So any guests or anybody who's going to do a webinar, we know exactly how it's going to flow, right? You have the run of show for us. You can do something very similar when you start to book your show, even if you're a solo guest, even if you're only doing the show. What is the flow of the show? What's the show open? What's going to happen after that? How are you going to introduce the show, the segment, the guest? You're going to have the meat, the talking points. What 3 points or more are you going to discuss during it? Now, if you got an 18-minute show, of course, you cannot have 100 points you want to make. So depending on the guest, depending on the show, you want to have that roadmap getting you from open to close. Open, introduce the show, introduce yourself. Some podcasters say, "Hi, I'm Monica Pierre, and I'm on a mission to help first generation women grow their, have their own so they can grow their own." They do that all the time in every show. You can have it pre-produced. It doesn't really matter. And then they have the interview. And then depending on the format, then they start wrapping it up. Some they'll have the call to action. If you want to know more about my programs, email me, or we'll get on a call, whatever that call to action is, and then they'll end the show, either pre-produced or however, it's very simple. So beginning to close. Now you want to say, I want to interview a guest, right? Here's some things that I've noticed. Even if your show can be a half hour or an hour, you want to use your time judiciously. I hear this all the time, and I don't know why people thought it was a good idea. So you open up your show, right? You have your little nice, wonderful show open. Then you say, "Hi, I'm Monica Pierre, and I'm on a mission, and the show's about X, Y, and Z, and it's great. And I have a fantastic guest. And she does this, and she does this, and or he does this, and he does that, and he's going to talk about X, Y, and Z." So let's get into it. Let's dive right into our interview. So it's been edited in sections, right? It's been edited in sections or recorded in sections. So, "Hi, Monica. Hi, Mary. Thanks for being on the show." And they say, "We're so glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, or tell us about yourself." So you just spent all of those 3 minutes talking about the guest, talking about their expertise or why you have them on the show. And now you want them to say basically the same thing. Either you can get right into the topic, or a little trick that you might find interesting is that, "Oh, we already talked about your background and what you do. What's something that's not on your resume? Or what's something that people don't know about you?" And it's kind of like a little icebreaker that you can use. So that's something to mix it up. So it's not all so predictable. Then you get into the interview, and you want to have an idea of the questions you want to ask. And the best questions to ask, not exclusively the questions that you ask, but the best ones are what is called, when we interview people, whether it's for television news or radio news or for a podcast or for an interview of any type, you ask people open-ended questions as opposed to closed questions. A closed question is, "Do you like peanut butter?" And if the guest is kind of shy, or the guest is nervous, or the guest doesn't really want to be bothered with you because they think you asked a really stupid question, they'll say, "No, I don't like peanut butter." And they stop. So here it is, you're 2 minutes into your 30-minute show, and you feel like it's just going off the rails. So a lot of guests who are used to being interviewed will say, "No, I don't like peanut butter. And you know why I don't like peanut butter?" And they give an answer. But most will say, "You asked me a yes or no answer. question, I give you a yes or no question. Then if you ask a closed or open question, you can say, I've been doing some research, and for some reason, you don't like peanut butter. This is the host asking. Can you tell us what it is about peanut butter that turns you off? Now the person is going to say, well, I don't like the consistency or the taste. Or my mom, we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every night when I was growing up. I cannot stand them. It draws more of a response out of the person. The next tip is to listen. Oftentimes you'll have your questions right because you're nervous, you don't want to miss anything. You know, you thought about it and you did your pre-interview with the person. You said you're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. And you miss an opportunity sometimes to do a follow-up interesting question. So let's go back to the peanut butter one. I understand you don't like peanut butter. Tell us why. Oh, every night we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I would like to sneak off and go to my friend's house where they would have fun food at night. They would have macaroni and cheese. And I love macaroni and cheese. And the person just talking about it. So instead of saying, let me talk about your book, you miss an opportunity to engage and talk a little bit more about the macaroni and cheese and the friends, or how did your mom respond when she found out you was sneaking out of the house to go get peanut butter, not eat peanut butter and jelly. So you're listening to the question. And even if you, for example, have a pre-interview, which I would recommend, especially if you're not a pre-interview, but just an idea to let them know what the talking points are going to be or what you're going to ask them in a way. You may want to listen to something that's interesting that they're saying during that previous where we're talking about the show's format and talking about the different things that you could talk about. Because again, what makes a good interview? It's a conversation. What makes a good interview? It's a conversation. So let's say, okay, that's great. That's all well and good, Monica, but I'm a solo host. It's just me and my listeners. Some same things apply. For example, I would recommend some kind of roadmap or run of show where you know what you're going to do. You're going to block it up. I'm going to play my open. I'm going to introduce the show, talk about what we're going to talk about. I may even talk about how the podcast came about, why this is so important to me. And you want to just say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes talking about this, then I'm going to shift and talk about this, elaborate here. I might have some teaching. I might have some things I want them to do. But so you know where you're going, even if it's just you. You're not just riffing because you have the gift of gab and you just want to talk off the top of your head, because people's time is valuable. You definitely want to make sure that you're respecting your audience, because remember, you know them, right? This is your core audience. This is your ideal listener. You want to make sure that you respect their time. And you want to ask those great questions that people are absolutely interested in. So, for example, if you're by yourself, you will say, I run into people all the time, or one of the things that my clients often struggle with is, and that way you bring people in, even though it's just you, you're not just talking, you're talking on behalf and interviewing on behalf of the people that are listening in your audience. So if you need any more clarity on that or any specific question, I'd love to hear those of you who have either started doing an interview or ran into some trouble because it ran off the rails. And with the yes or no question, I never say never use a yes or no question, because sometimes they can be quite effective, particularly if you have the type of show where you're trying to get information and draw people, sometimes elected officials or sometimes people who've had media training. They know how to pivot and avoid. You may just want to say yes or no. Did you cheat on your taxes? Yes or no? And that could be very powerful and engaging. But you really want in that conversation to make sure that you're asking questions that give you more than a yes or no. Okay. But let me know if there's something specific or an experience that you've had that you'd like to talk about. Okay. All right. We talked about that. I'm going to skip some of it because we touched upon it. Laverne, if you need me to, I don't know why it's not advancing. Okay, so we talked about the run of show. Very simply, think about how is it going to flow. Everything is a format. If you watch your television shows, you can tell that there's a format there. Um, Major talking points and a call to action. For those of you who are authors, entrepreneurs, you have some new music that you've released. This is the opportunity, or even for your guests. You have them on the show, they've just released a book, or they're having a seminar or a webinar or something that you want to get people to or people to register for. Before the show closes, you can say, well, how can we find your book? You have this program coming up, you have a coaching program coming up. So even if you're by yourself and you say, I work with men who are starting their business, whatever. I'm just making up an absolute person to talk to. I have this free offer. All you have to do is shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Some kind of call to action. Or you can say, you know what? We really love when you listen. Would you subscribe to our podcast? That way we can reach more people. That's a call to action. And then you close the show. And as the talent, keep in mind that particularly when it's audio only, it's your voice. So use the full range of your voice, the highs, the lows, speeding it up, dropping your voice, leaning in, dropping the volume. All of that engages your listener. Talk to one listener at a time, even though you might have a gazillion subscribers. The most powerful shows are the ones where the people feel connected and the people feel that you're talking to them, that you know them. How many times have you spoken to someone or been a guest on someone's show or someone's podcast, or you listened and that you felt like they're inside my head? Do they know me? Have they read my journal? You want to make sure that you're connecting. And you do that with your voice. You do that by posing questions. You do that by talking about when you run into people, they're always asking you that question and they feel connected. And here's a trick that we used in radio a lot, and it will work in podcasting. Smiling works. When you're reading an introduction, or not reading, but saying it, if you smile, you loosen up and you sound warmer, you sound more engaging. So you may be a little nervous, you may like, oh my God, I'm gonna mess up. But if you start to smile, even if no one sees you, even if you're a solo host, it's going to sound like, wow, this host knows me. And I like listening to her. I like listening to him. I'm going to go quickly with these. If you have a question, let me know. You're going to step 3, record your podcast. There's some free tools that you can use, software, Audacity, very easy. If you can use your phone, you know the basic concept. I'll be honest, I've never used GarageBand. I understand, a lot of musicians use it or people who have their music. You can also pay for things like Adobe Audition, which is more of what the industry of the professionals use, but especially if you're going to do a lot of multi-channel mixing and editing. But if your show's a simple show, right? Because one of the things that we want to talk about is how can you get started without feeling like you got to do 1,000 things? You may want to just keep it simple. Your voice, you and your guest voice, a little music bed, you're going to edit that, mix that down, and you're done.
Well, Monica, we do have a couple of questions, and one is tips on help making a timid person relax in an interview or a nervous person.
Oh, that is amazing. That is a fantastic question. Thank you for that. You know, even when someone does a great job, even when someone has been interviewed a lot, they always ask, was that okay? Was that okay? And so for those who are really timid and really nervous, your job is to help relax them. And some of the things that you can do is, some people call it a pre-interview. It's something that you set up, and I like to call it more like a run through or a walk through. And that way you help them know things like how long is it going to be, how you're going to start the show, how much time do they have, some of the things you want to point out. So that way they have an idea, because they're just kind of nervous about doing well. And sometimes they don't realize how powerful they are in connecting with people. So if you can help them get out of themselves and say, my audience is going to love you. You know that story about when you skinned your knee when you were 5? Can you make sure that you tell that story? Because they're going to love it. So you help them feel that they're so important to the success of that interview. And they'll probably be shy after they do your interview. Some things that can help them. I always tell people just kind of take a deep breath. Make sure you have your water next to you, and you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I like to do interviews, what I call live to tape. Even though we're recording it, I said we're going to act like it's live, because I tell you, if that timid person knows that you can start and stop, they're going to start and stop and think that they've messed up and that they can do it better. And that 20-minute block of your time to get them on, interview them, turns into over an hour because they're not satisfied. They didn't think they did a good job. So just say, you know what, we're going to be fine. Let's do it like it's live, and it'll be perfect. Again, and then they're going to relax a little bit, and it's just encourage them to keep going. Encourage them to do more and more interviews, because that's going to help them. Because what they have to say is important, and the world needs to hear it. Your audience needs to hear it, and they're being of service. And when you can take yourself out of yourself and focus on the service, then you find a difference.
So Monica, also there's someone wants to know if you're going to share this presentation from tonight's webinar, your slides.
Would that be helpful? I know yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And we can figure out how to get it to them.
Yes.
It should be pretty simple, pretty easy.
Yeah, I think we may
so
have
I'm going to do the tip sheet and definitely the slide. You can have that.
Okay, awesome. We'll get that to them. And then also, how do you prevent a podcast guest from engaging in an inappropriate line of conversation?
So I'm trying to think about, I like to have conversations before. Again, that run through, if they know what the show is about, they should respect. But sometimes you're going to say, let's just move on. Or, my show doesn't like that, isn't about that. And then remember, if it's pre-recorded, you have the power of the edit at your fingertips. You cut that out. I've had people do that when I worked in radio, where they just were disparaging or said something that it would alienate my audience, and it wasn't live. So I edited it out. Now, let's say you are live. It's your job to hang on that. Just don't let people just go off and into tangents, even if they're not saying anything that's inappropriate. Because sometimes they'll go down rabbit holes, and your 15-minute podcast is like 22 minutes, and you still haven't gotten to like the juicy part yet, because they're just talking and talking and talking. You're the one who's the host of the show. You keep it as tight as you need it to be. And that takes practice as well. And don't be afraid to cut somebody off, and say, okay, let's move on. And that's what I find works.
One other question is tips on how to best monetize podcasts.
And that's it's such an interesting thing. And a couple of thoughts I have on this, because I figured somebody would ask me that, because basically monetizing your audience numbers works well when you have a big audience. But there are other things that you can do. For example, it's like you get paid a few dollars per 1,000 listeners. So if you have 435 listeners, you most likely will not attract an advertiser to spend money on your show. So basically $18 per 30 seconds or $25. But basically it's built on and based on the numbers. So if you got 500,000 people, or you have 100,000, then you're going to attract those advertisers. But my question is always this. Remember we asked about why. Why are you doing the podcast? Are you doing the podcast because you see it as a wonderful opportunity to connect with your audience and promote your own services, promote your own products, promote your own offerings. That's gold too. Because sometimes all we think about, can I make, like the celebrities, can I make millions of dollars with my podcast? I never say never, but that's a hurdle. So you want to look at things like that. So another way to do it, you can create a paywall as well. You can say, this is the content that I offer, but I have subscription. I have a subscription based service or information, and people will pay you for that as well. Because again, you're bringing them in sometimes with that free podcast, and then you're directing them to something else. And then also, a lot of people do crowdfunding. I don't know if you have any of the authors or people who are going to be releasing a book, but going back to John Lee Dumas, he did something because everything was online for him, podcasting, all of his coaching, all of his service. Then he decided that he was going to do a traditionally published book. He did crowdsourcing and funding on his show. And basically it said that I'm releasing this book, the first X amount of people, if you pre-order the book or 2 or 3 books, what it was, you're going to get this, that, and the other. So he had an incredible launch of his book by encouraging people to pre-order his book to get some services. One of them, you could get an hour of coaching with him. And at the time, he was charging a ton of money for coaching, like $30,000. So someone, all they had to do was just buy a few books, and they had an opportunity to win that. So you can think of some creative ways, in addition to having a sponsor that's going to spend a lot of money with you, and you really at this point don't have anybody listening to your show.
So Monica, I noticed like for in your background, you using particular items to market yourself. Of course, you're Emmy Award winning. So I'm just curious to know, and I know my daughter and my son-in-law, they have a podcast and they have their show, a picture of their show, which Two-Step Homes, in their backgrounds. Of course, there's an opportunity to promote. So what type of tips would you give our viewers tonight on what is it that you think that they could put in their background to just market them so people can maybe even ask questions about, like, when did you win that Emmy, or does that picture in the background back there have any significance? Those types.
Right. And I normally don't have it so busy, but I was working until the last minute. Normally I'll take it away, and I'll just, because again, people are not, they're looking at these things. So if it's going to be too distracting, I try to, put it down or whatever. But the Emmy is a good conversation a place, and people say, what is that really? So for your daughter and son-in-law, they may want to have a nice little marketing piece that's positioned where over the shoulder where people see it. Because again, with these podcasts, it's your opportunity to promote what you're doing, particularly if you're going to be on somebody else's podcast or somebody else's video podcast or show. And that works beautifully. And it's just, not being shy about it. Now, you don't want to be so like, and I am an Emmy Award winning journalist and I've written 2 books and buy my books now. You don't want to be ridiculous with it, but you'd like to strategically place these things. So when you see the Emmy, you go, well, she might know a few things. She got an Emmy, right? Or she has a book, or he has this. And that way people are going, wow, this is interesting, but not too distracting. You don't want to have too many things where people are looking at the angel. I love my little angel, but sometimes she's a bit much. So, you move her. So as I move more and more things, there's less for you to be looking at and trying to figure out what's that. And we saw it so much when we first went into the lockdown last year, right? People like, oh, so-and-so correspondent, they're at home. What's all that? So that's how we are. We tend to want to know what's going on in the background. So sometimes less is more, but the more you use can be very strategic to help promote what you're doing or what you're offering, or even the show.
Well, Monica, that's great. We still have a little more time, unless you have any more information you would like to share. We have about another 20 minutes possibly.
Okay, yeah, I'd like some more questions. Let me go through, make sure that I'm not missing anything in particular. But yes, the PowerPoint will be available. And I just want to go through really quick. Oh, yeah, I'm a big proponent of positioning the microphone, We talked a little bit about that. And the main thing is if you want to make sure you're speaking into the right part of the microphone. So for example, if you're speaking on this side of your Blue Yeti, that's not the right side. This is the right side. So you want to not speak into it like that. You know, you're not singing. And a big tip is anywhere from 3 to 4 fingers away from the mic. So you don't have to speak right into it. And this is one I can show you. I also have an external microphone. So for example, if you go to do some voiceover work, you would have about 3 to 4 fingers from it. So you're not, and a little to the angle. So that way, if you don't have a windscreen or something to protect all your popping of your P's like this, you should be okay because it's slightly at an angle. And then the plosives or the s from some of the harshness of the S sound won't be so much into it. So that's on positioning your microphone. I'm going to go back. So, you know, and wear your headphones. It's amazing what you can hear with those headphones that you don't always hear with your earbuds. Okay, we talked about editing, and you're going to edit, you're going to upload your podcast. I'm not going to go through so much of this because it's pretty clear once you get my PowerPoint, but you definitely want to upload your podcast. And when you do so to Apple or to Spotify, you want to have a good description, good title, some show notes where you go. It's more like going into more of a summary or a detail of it. You could even have links. Let's say you have a link to your guests, their offerings, or maybe you have a link where people can get your free information so you can get their email list, because emails, that's really the way to go. Build that email list. Everyone is saying eventually Facebook and all the others, we are not going to have possession of it, or it won't be ours. So they can't take away your email names, and people can always opt out of that as well. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, you want to make sure that you submit them to these directories, and they have specifications that they want as well. And okay, so it's time to launch. Go ahead and do it. Get it done. You want to create some strategies around launching, just like you would open a business, or you'd have a grand opening, or you would have a book that you would want the world to know about. You want to also get the word out about your podcast. And what people do, you don't have to do 50 shows like John Lee Dumas did. He had 50 shows banked before he started. One of the things that will really be a good tip, go ahead and record your first show, get it edited, record a second show, a third show, maybe even a fourth show, so that when you launch, you can launch with more than one show. So what if someone is so like, this is amazing, Laverne, I just love your show. Oh, she has a second episode. Let me listen to that. So they can almost start to binge listen when you launch. So you have more than one show already queued up. You can go live on social media saying that the show is going to premiere and you're so excited, or debut, I should say. And you can do a little pre getting the word out. Old school also works. You can go grassroots, text, email your friends, email your clients, email your supporters, let them know that the show is coming and you would love their feedback. You'd love for them to help you get your subscription and your subscribers numbers up. Another tip is to build a podcast website, but that's a tip, and I think it would just depend. That's why you're using a host, so you won't have to do that. You might have some links to your podcast itself, but to actually store the audio, that's a big, heavy file. So you may want to just create a podcast with the name of the website, the name of the podcast, just to drive people there, but not necessarily to store your file there. So you can share it on pre-existing channels. Of course, that email list is very important. You can actually submit a press release and write a press release and send it to Pod News and Discover Pods. There's some places where you can write a little bit about your podcast. So in a sense, now you're the marketer. You're not just the talent. You're not just the host. You're not just the executive producer. You're also getting the word out about it. Write show notes. In the descriptions, and of course, we talked a little bit about building a podcast website. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So, any more questions? Yeah, and
Monica,
getting
I don't,
sponsors. Yeah, the sponsorships works too. I have a sponsor, and again, it's not a gazillion dollars. It's some money. It doesn't stop me from getting other sponsors as well. So there are different things. So I'm using it to promote something else. So be clear about what success will look like for you with your podcast. Or you're doing it to hopefully get somebody to buy you out or take over the show, or you're doing it to promote something else that you're doing, to build your email list or to build a brand awareness. All of those things work as a reason for your podcast. I
Monica,
can't hear you.
Monica, there's one more question, and it states, you like the road quality and the usability better than a Yeti?
Uh, you know, it was, I found that this was just so pretty and so cute, and I had it. But let me tell you, this is good. There is nothing wrong with the Yeti, nothing at all. It's a beautiful microphone. It looks professional. Get this one out the way. And you can use it. You can use it. I liked this one because I have two. So if I'm remote and I go out, I'll have one and I'll have my guests have one. But it's just a preference. It's just a preference. Nothing wrong with the Yeti. The Yeti is great.
And you have just one mic, right, Monica? Because I thought I saw two, but you only have one mic, right? I
Uh,
mean, that you're using tonight.
okay. So yeah. So this, I was showing you this, and I also have an external mic. This is the one
Oh,
that you
yeah, that's what I was gonna, I thought you
but
had another
that
mic.
that it doesn't have a connection for your computer. It goes into a camera. So again, I would say get started. The more bells and whistles that you have, the more it might delay you, the more you might need someone to help you. I come from media. So for me to have a desk that looks like, a disaster is not new. But if you're just trying to build and you never launch, all this is doing you no good. It's just standing between you and service, you and helping, you and giving your audience what they need, you and promoting your business, you in getting book sales or getting people to sign up for your programs.
So Monica, I believe that's all the questions. I believe someone just made a comment basically saying that they have a Yeti, but the small one is great for the second guest.
Mm-hmm. You'll love it. I mean, I love this. This is like a magnet. And, actually, I have two, so I don't want to show you my back. But yeah, so this will be perfect, especially if you're on location, you're on remote and you have your banner. So you have your banner, the name of your show, right? And you have these two microphones. It looks great. So when you're doing your social media and you're posting, you're doing Instagram, it's going to look great. But again, you don't have to have this. Easy to use. It's not heavy at all. And you're going to look like you're live, all the way live.
Well, Monica, thank you so very much for this informative webinar. It was great. Do you have any other closing remarks before we end?
Yes. Again, why do you want to do a podcast? And if you don't want to do it because you know what, it's a lot of work for me, that's fine too. But if you're launching, sharing your message, be consistent. If it's a weekly show, put it out there weekly. You don't have to do it every week. You can batch them. You can say, you know what? On a Saturday, I'll get my guest. I will interview them. I will even use Zoom and just take the audio and edit my show. I might do 5 or 6 shows. So when I launch, I'm already a week plus ahead. And you don't have to feel like, oh my God, I just got off of work. Let me go do a show real quick. Let me go edit a show real quick. You can get it done in advance. So when you do launch, you got 4 or 5 shows already there. And then another 2 weeks, you say, okay, this is my interview time. This is when I'm going to get the show produced. I'm going to know who my guests are. I'm going to do my run of show or my pre-interview. We're going to record several of them kind of back to back. I'm going to take another day, edit my very simple editing, music bed. I'm going to put the rest of the show in there with the bed, done, next. Just get it done because you've been sitting on it too long. And
Well,
thank you, Laverne, for this opportunity to talk about being interviewed, some interview tips, and just getting using this tool. Oftentimes when we worked in media, everybody told us, our program directors, our station managers, our news directors, what we could do, what we could talk about, what the story would be. You now, because you are the producer, executive producer, and the host of the show, you get to decide. So use that power that you have.
well, again, Monica, thank you so very much. It's always an honor to hear you and to be in your presence, even though it's virtual.
You
And
were
I
a
learned a
great
lot
guest
about
on the show. Thank you
podcasting.
for being on my show.
Well, hey, thank you so much. And podcast, I don't think I'll be able to do that because I'm still somewhat shy, believe it or not. It seems as though when I get in front of the camera or in front of a mic, I just kind of freeze up. And of course, Monica, you've been my coach for some time. So thank you so much for the tips. I always think about them, especially even tonight when I was reading your bio, I began to think about the things that you said. So I
Right. And
see
so
here's some improvements.
You did great because you weren't reading, even though you had your script, you weren't, Monica Pierre was born a poor sharecropper's daughter. You weren't doing any of that. You were just talking and telling. And I'm sure you probably marked where you wanted to pause and what you wanted to emphasize.
Yes.
All
And
of
I
those.
learned that from her, everyone. That's my coach. And so she's a great coach. So Havala, I know that you are great at what you do
Oh,
too.
yeah.
And all
All
the
that you're
others that are on
doing on the
tonight.
West
Thank
Coast.
you. Thank you so very much, Monica. And of course, we host a number of these type of informative webinars at least twice a month. And so if you want to see what other webinars that we have going on for next month, please go to our website, which I mentioned earlier in our webinar, which is nrvchamber.org. And just check out our website, even if you're interested in becoming a member of the Chamber of Commerce. We would love to have you. So as you can see, we have 2 exciting events coming up. And matter of fact, the Ladies with Drive Golf Clinic is still happening. We have our golf clinic for the last 5 Saturdays. We've already had 2 and we have 3 more to go. So if you're interested in signing up and learning how to play golf or just improve on some of your skills, your short game or your long, go on our website and sign up. We would love to have you. Also, we have our 8th annual Crescent City Classic Golf Tournament, which is scheduled September the 24th, 2021, presented by Liberty Bank and Trust. We're really excited about our tournament this year. We're going to take all the precautionary measures in regards to this virus. But again, if you know any golfers out there that may be interested in having a foursome, or they just want to come out and golf and we'll team you up with someone, again, visit our website and sign up for our golf tournament. So on next month, we're actually going to be doing a webinar in regards to procurement opportunities with the Regional Transit Authority. So we would love for you to join us and learn how to do business with RTA as well as the certifications. So as we close, again, thank you to all of those that joined us tonight. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact our office at 504-948-0991. And I put my email address in the chat. So please email me just send me an email requesting the presentation tonight, and I will make sure that I forward it to everyone that participated. So again, thank you so very much. And I look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. Good evening.